Thank you all for joining us. I hope that you didn't have any trouble getting in. I know that Zoom has implemented some new security features, so it's been challenging to navigate some of those as we're all getting used to this kind of virtual platform, which is, it has its pros and cons, absolutely. But we're thankful to still be able to meet, and it's wonderful to see your faces and see other people during this time. So um, we are going to kick things off. First off, I want to thank Diane from our chamber team. She's on with us today for setting all of this up, and the hype committee for kind of helping steer the direction of this. And we're really excited about having John here with us today so he can share some of his stories, especially at a time that we're experiencing right now. So I also want to thank Brandon Crew with the State Farm Agency for being one of our Howell Young Professionals sponsors. So thank you, Brandon. We appreciate that. And without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce John. So Lieutenant Colonel John Samples is the Command Inspector General for the United States Army Civic Affairs and Psychological Operations Command Airborne at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He provides. Are you in Fort Bragg right now, John?
I'm currently stationed. Obviously, we're teleworking, but currently stationed at Fort Bragg. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so is that where he was telling me that he's had great weather this week, so
Yep.
we
Yep.
are all very envious of that.
And not to rub it in anymore, but we actually live in Pinehurst, North Carolina. So if anybody's a golf fan, Pinehurst is a pretty nice place to live.
Yeah, we've had some great conversations, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy everything that John has to share with us today. He provides Inspector General support to 13,000 U.S. Army Reserve soldiers stationed all over the country, and his previous assignments include Joint Command Inspector General for all United States forces in Afghanistan. The duties and responsibilities there, he provided Inspector General support to 30,000 U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine civilians and contractors in a hostile combat environment, and reported directly to the 4-star commander of all forces, joint and coalition in the Afghanistan theater. He was at Fort Carson and the 4th Infantry Division Command Inspector General as well. And his list goes on and on, but he's going to talk a little bit today on some of his experiences, and then also a little bit about he'll be here in the fall as well, so he might share a little bit about what he has done and what he'll be sharing in the fall at the Hero Roundtable. So he'll be here for that as well, and he has some really great stories. So John, I'm going to kick it over to you, and thank you again for being with us today. We really appreciate it. We are going to be taking questions, and we do want this to be a active dialogue and engaging. So if you guys have questions, go ahead and type them into the chat, and I will go ahead and either stop John if it's something relevant to what he's saying, or we will kind of hold him to the end, and we'll leave about 20 minutes towards the end to go ahead and do that. So John, if you want to go ahead and start.
Certainly. So Janelle, first, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. And Diane, thank you very much for coordinating all of this. One real quick administrative note. In the military, we're very structured in how we conduct meetings and whatnot. Luckily, I'm in my bedroom, so that's not the same way that we would in a formal environment. So for those that have coffee, please don't hesitate to do so, and please don't think that I'm being disrespectful if I drink some of mine as well. So as Janelle said, I've got a couple of things that I would like to discuss just from a background standpoint, and then kind of how we got here and how we're all talking today, and then a little bit more about just some things going forward in the future. So I'm a Howell High School graduate. I'm Livingston County proud, Michigan State grad, and I was going to Eastern Michigan University. I'm not going to give the date, but my gray hair should kind of indicate how long ago that was. But I was sitting in class one time, and we started to hear some grumblings about some things that were going on in Somalia. I stepped out of class and turned on CNN in the Union or at Eastern Michigan University and saw soldiers getting wounded in Somalia. So I stopped going to class that night, went to the recruiter the next day and signed up was in basic training 3 months later. So the things that I've learned in my military career and professionally, I got out for a little while and then got back in. Everything I learned in my backyard in Howell, Michigan, in the basketball courts, in the baseball fields, and everything everything that I've done has been as a result of Livingston County and my upbringing. So there's nothing but greatness that comes out of our community. So I'm just that's a standalone statement. I start off with kind of a rah-rah statement, but it's not, I'm not selling anything. I'm just passionate about who I am because of how I was raised in our community. So I've got a couple of 2 or 3 things that I would like to talk about just to illustrate some a little bit more of my perspective. First and foremost, I can tell you this. Like I said, I was in the military. I got out, came back home to Michigan, and started working in manufacturing down in Detroit at a company called American Axle and Manufacturing. And then a handful of years later, I moved to Federal Mogul, and then I recognized that I was just missing out on something. I just missed something, and it wasn't the company; it was service. I missed serving in our military. So I got back in. My wife Cindy and I, Cindy's from Howell as well, we made a family commitment to get back in. And I tell you all that to say this: my civilian professional experience is pretty limited. I can tell you this: I don't fully understand what you all are going through with your businesses and trying to keep your stores open, keep employees there. I can't speak to that, and because I don't know exactly what you're going through. I don't want to say that I even have comparable experiences. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is just some things I've learned that I think that you may enjoy, and I think they're universal truths. So the first little anecdote I have for you is when I got back from Afghanistan in September. I came back to our small town, Pinehurst, and my son and daughter go to a small private school in this area, and I was asked to be their basketball coach. Apparently, they know how good Howell High School basketball is, so they asked me to be the basketball coach without having seen me play. But they really asked me to teach something else, to teach them character. And that's exactly what I did. I said, I'm not anybody. In fact, growing up in Howell, at one point, the Howell Booster Club had a fundraiser, and it was donkey basketball. And I watched a donkey kick a ball into a basket. So it doesn't require great skill, I don't think, to put a ball in a hoop. But character is something that is lasting. So I told the boys, I'm not teaching you shooting a basketball. I'm not showing you chest pass. I'm not doing anything. In fact, they didn't want to know anything about a chest pass. They don't do that anymore anyways. But I'm teaching you character. Those things that I'm going to teach you will be applicable on the basketball court, but also in the hallways, the classroom, the boardrooms, and the battlefield. So one of my players, I'm not going to mention his name or his dad's name, but his father is a player in the NBA. He's an all-star. He's won the world championship with the LA Lakers a handful of years ago. But his dad lives elsewhere, and he's in this area with his mom. He'd gone home for Christmas, and he came back, and he was just in a bad way. And I spoke to his mom, and he said, well, his dad had told him that he would never be as good as he was, and he'll never amount to anything, and he'll never play in the NBA like he did. And I thought, that is just absolutely horrible. This young man, who's just starting his life, had just been crushed by his role model, his father. And so right in the same week, we lost 2 of our starters as well. And I was trying to think through myself, how do we get through this? And so I pulled out a whiteboard, and I put everybody's name on the board, and I drew a circle with pieces of pie on there, essentially, to divide our entire team up. And I listed everybody on the team by name, and I talked to them about what they did for our team. those assets they brought, whether it was excitement, energy, effort, encouragement in the locker room, encouragement on the floor, what they brought to the team. And when it was all said and done, I said, do you notice that I haven't said to any of you, I expect you to win the game for us? Because that's not what we do. But if we unite and we form a team, there's no way we can be beat. No team can beat this team if we're united in our efforts, because we all are one team with value. So the last game, so it's unique in this small town, and with a private school, there's championships at all levels. So we're going into the championship game. We were down by 5 with 1 minute and 38 seconds left, and my assistant coach said, I'm going to start working on a speech to talk to the boys about what a great year it was. And I said, well, it's going to be a great year because we're going to end up undefeated. I have no thought about loss. There's no chance we're going to lose this. And I brought the boys together and I said, I believe in you. Absolutely believe in who you are. Sure enough, we scored the last 9 points, and we ended up winning the championship by 4 when it's all said and done, just because of telling the boys I believe in you. So that's kind of my first point in all this. It's amazing what happens when people understand that they have value, and when you as a leader let them know that you believe in who they are and what they bring to your organization. That is, there's no amount of practice, there's no amount of, again, donkey shots or chest pass that can compare to the idea that I am a part of a team and I bring value to that team, and I'm valued for who I am, not necessarily what my last name is or what did I make a sale that day. Because when you start to understand that you are a part of a team and bring value, you work so much harder. You are not, committed. I mean, you're actually convicted. You bring conviction to that organization. And so I'm trying to draw the parallel as well. At this time, I know that the people that we're working with and our families, I'm certain that we're all kind of down. But this is the opportunity to remind them that they bring value. We're all going to work through this all together. And when we have the opportunity to see that you are a part of something and you bring value, I think it'll be a pretty strong, a strong effect. The next thing I want to discuss is an event that happened when I was in Afghanistan. So I got in the habit of our day in Afghanistan. I usually started 5 in the morning. Usually went to bed no earlier than 11 o'clock at night, midnight. There are long days. I don't think there's any chance of me or amount of beauty sleep that's going to help this face. So I didn't need the sleep. We lived on coffee and pre-workout and whatnot. So when I wasn't in the office, I was in the gym. And what I found that I was doing, I was clapping. And I do this all the time. I clap 3 times. I do it for a couple of different reasons. One, it's kind of letting people know when I'm clapping, good things are about to happen. Whether I'm in the gym, look out, it's gonna get weird here. But the other thing is, with 3 claps, it helps me be reminded of the 3 most important things in my life: my wife Cindy, my son Bryce, and my daughter Lauren. It's a positive reinforcement all of the time about those things that are good and right. Sorry if I've got a little cold, or I'll blame it on the coronavirus. It couldn't be the fact I get a bit emotional about my family. But so I would clap all the time. It was just, it's in a place of darkness. Let you know where I was. I was in Bagram, Afghanistan, at Bagram Air Force Base. As Janelle said, I was the command inspector general for all forces in Afghanistan. And what we essentially do as the inspector general is we're the eyes, ears, and conscience of the command. So we listen to people that have issues all of the time. So I would always say, when they say, Colonel Samples, how are you today? Not a complaint. Oh, wait a minute. That's all we get. That's all we get is complaints by design. That's in fact, we anything that we interact with is called a complaint form. So that's what we get all day long is complaints. And we're in Afghanistan. And Bagram was also known as Rocket City because we would get hit with rockets and missiles and artillery and and IEDs all of the time. I wasn't going to let that affect me. In fact, I was telling Janelle the other day, probably not the best example, but whenever incoming came in, one had to you had to look for a hardened structure, had to jump on the ground, cover your ears and your head in the event that there was a concussion, blast out that way, so that we could at least help prevent TBIs. Well, I was laying on the ground and I had a lot of coffee and pre-workout in me, and I thought, I'm not going to let this stop me. So I'm laying on the ground. So I just thought, well, I'm going to ride this out. I'm just going to do as many push-ups as I can. And I thought, you know what? I went to Eastern Michigan and spent a lot of time in Ypsilanti, but I don't even think I would do something this jacked up where you're getting bombed and doing push-ups and working out at the same time. I just don't know who does that. So here I am in Rocket City. And I had to find a way to be positive. And it was through this clapping. It was through this reminder of the fact that there's good out there. And at one point, the SGS, the Secretary of the General Staff, Major Gavin, asked me, she said, "Sir, are you okay?" So the SGS, she works directly for the Chief of Staff and for the generals. And she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Of course, why?" And she said, "You're always smiling and you're always clapping. And I didn't see that from you this morning." And I said, "No, I was just kind of focused on something else. I'm sorry. I'll fix myself. I'll start clapping again." And she said, "You have to understand, when we see you, you bring us hope." And so I say that, and I do that with a pause. In this place of darkness, where we're getting bombed all the time, and we got a little bit desensitized to that. And in fact, I was telling Janelle that it was always when you got bombed, it was we'd call it rocket ice cream. So we'd go to the chow hall. If you get bombed that day, then you would eat ice cream, and so you're trying to make light of something. And again, I think that was, on the one hand, is a good way to kind of keep calm, but also it's another kind of crazy world that you live in, that you say you reward yourself with ice cream when you're getting attacked. So, but in this world of darkness, in this place where nothing is good or right, we had to find a way to bring up hope in our spirits. And the Secretary of the General Staff has said, by you, in your presence, in your clapping, in your smile, you bring up hope to everybody in the front office. They're the ones that are carrying out and developing the plans to execute the war. And so one person's smile, one person's attitude, one person's clapping has the ability to provide hope for people above, below, and all across the formation. And I tell you all that because I just thought I was trying to do more pull-ups. I didn't know that I had the effect or the impact on others. So we as leaders of our organization, we always have the opportunity to bring forth hope for the folks that we work with our families. I challenge you all to find your way to do that same thing, and understand that people are looking to all of us leaders to see how we're going to get through this. The last, and I'm going to take a pause for coffee real quick. Nicole, I'm glad that you brought your partner in there with you. The last, unfortunately, is a story about Afghanistan as well. I was in Afghanistan in 2015 as well. I was, at that point, I was a part of the, so as Janelle said, I'm a civil affairs officer. Another umbrella of special operations is special forces, civil affairs, and psychological operations. At that time, I was a planner, future operations planner for NATO Special Operations Component Command and the Special Joint Task Force, Afghanistan. Any plans for special operations came out of our small camp and out of our office. And there was just a handful of us, but one was a gentleman named Master Sergeant George Vera. George came in May, so I'd gotten there in February, and it was just a depressing place. I didn't know that Afghanistan could get more depressing. It was really, really bad just in our office. There's folks had been there for 9 months, and so they were looking. They could see the light at the end of the tunnel when they were getting out. They didn't. People in Afghanistan, we don't come in as a unit all together and leave all at the same time, and so there's this constant integration and constant flow of people coming in and out. And if the bulk of the people are leaving soon, there's a different mindset for those, and you're a replacement essentially, and so you're not seen. It's tough to integrate as part of that team. So I'd been there for 3 months of this, and it was a really tough place. And then George came in with his attitude and bravado, and he was just a larger than life character, and just a great person across the board. Fast forward to August 7th, 2015, excuse me. It was 10 o'clock at night. We were still working, and Colonel John Haight had said, "You know what? I think we should let our hair down, and let's celebrate." And by that, they had near beer or 0% alcohol beer, and so that was going to be our celebration. We were going to call it short for the day at 10 o'clock at night, and we were going to kind of celebrate some of the successes that we had had. And he said, "I'm going to go get some near beer." And I said, "Sure, I'll join you." And he said, "You don't have to." I said, "Come on, we'll go out together." And as we came out of our building, it's the JOC, it's called the Joint Operations Center. We had come around, and there was a concussion so great it threw me to my feet, and all the glass in the buildings around me exploded out, and we were being attacked. This was context-wise, Camp Integrity. It was in Kuwait, excuse me, not Kuwait, Kabul, and it was kind of surrounded by some government, U.S. government agency camps, and then there was a German camp next to us. But it was clear that we were kind of surrounded, but we were a strategic camp, and we were targeted for what we did. The enemy knew what we did there, and we were attacked. And at that point, I ran back to our office to get my kit on and get my gear, and George and I, Master Sergeant George Vera and I, were responsible for securing the JOC, because as this camp was, what we did, like I told you, our specific building was the nucleus of this whole camp. So we had the responsibility of covering this. And he said, "Sir, do you have this?" And I said, "Of course I do. I've got this." He said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to the sounds of the gunfire." So at that point, there was gunfire all around. There was RPGs going off. There was clearly some activity over by the main entrance. When I say all this is, and I'll use as a point of reference. Anybody know the Howell High School football field and the surrounding area where it's fenced off and kind of has that hill? Our whole entire camp was no bigger than that area. So a gunfight, rocket-propelled grenades, IEDs, suicide vests, all those things going off at one point is essentially happening right around you. And so George said, "I'm going to go to the sounds of the gunfire." And at that point, we were doing different things. We secured the JOC, and we secured the helicopter landing zone, and the fight went on for hours and hours. And I couldn't wait for dawn to hit, for sunlight to come, because the noises were just, I mean, talk about being scared of the dark. Ooh, it was just because I was at one point standing there, and Colonel Haight had said to me, "Isn't this amazing?" What do you mean amazing? And he had been in a lot more firefights than I had. And I said, "Sir, if my mom knew what I was doing right now, she'd kill me. I mean, if she knew what was going on." And so he was found a way to laugh through this. I didn't find it to be too laughable. I just wanted the light to come up. I wanted to see the light of day. And unfortunately, when we did, we saw the destruction that was all around. And at that point, the only person that was unaccounted for was George. George had been taken away. He had been shot. Um, to give you a little bit of background, George had eliminated the threat. The There was a 1,000-pound vehicle-borne improvised explosive device that blew off two. I'm trying to think of a roll door, but a big steel roll door um, that was 15 feet high, 30 feet wide, blew that one off, sent it 100, 200 feet away, and then knocked down the other one just as if it was a piece of paper. Um, Terrorists had come into our camp. George had neutralized the threat and had gone out and set out security, putting people in place where they needed to go, drew a map of what the situation looked like, and he came back to explain to some of the leaders what was going on. He said, "Let's get behind this wall." And as George tells me now, he was around a guy named Colonel Pat Colleton. Pat was affectionately known as the bullet sponge. Everywhere Pat went, Pat got shot, or people around Pat got shot. And he said, and he remembers saying this, he said, and again, this is the craziness about this, where you can laugh and joke about this. But he said, I was getting ready to show my map, and I saw Pat next to me, and he said, "I've got to get behind something because everybody that's around Pat gets shot." And at that point, he said, "I got shot." George received 4 bullets to his lower back, and then was drug off the battle space, and was flown out immediately to Bagram, to the next higher hospital. And then he was shortly thereafter flown to Germany, where his family was flown to spend time with him. He said, I won't use his colorful language. He said, "But I knew I was pretty messed up because they don't invite your family to Germany unless you're about to die." George didn't die. George, his heart, his love of life was too great for 4 bullets. Next time I saw George was in Walter Reed Hospital. He had fired 3 sets of doctors because they kept on saying, "We're going to medically retire you." And he said, "I'm not retiring from the Army." He said, they said, "Well, you can't walk." And he said, "I can't walk yet, but even without the use of my legs, I can still serve." So George is still in a wheelchair, but he's still fighting. He just retired because it had been 23 years, and he said, "I got out on my terms because I've got other things I need to do for our country." George has since won several gold medals, several silver medals, and bronze medals for the Invictus Games. In fact, I talked to George after he won his first gold medal in basketball, and I said, "George, how do you win a gold medal in basketball? You weren't that good when you had legs. How do you do that without the use of legs?" And he said, "I'm just that good, John. I'm just that good." And then he told me something that I'll never forget. He said, "I'm a better person without the use of my legs than I was with the use of my legs." And I thought, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "I would have never realized my potential if I still had my legs. I had that attitude that I was just gonna to conquer everything. And it took me to lose the use of my legs to realize that it had nothing to do about how much weight that I could lift, or how loud I could get, or what I could shoot with my weapon. That's not who I am. Who I am is somebody that is far greater than just these other parts. I can change the world." And it took me losing my legs to recognize that. He recognized that he was a part of something bigger than self. So I wanted to at least talk to you, to all of you, about these 3 stories. because again, I think they're universal truths. I think that people, our children, the people we work with, anybody that's around us, they really need to believe that they have value. And when you do that, it's amazing what they will do, that they'll do with you and for you when you let them know that you can change the world. The second thing is people need hope. There's all kinds of negativity right now. All you have to do is turn on, and it doesn't matter what station you turn on, there's all kinds of negativity. But that's a choice. We can choose to be negative or we can choose to be positive. Everything that we do is a choice. How we react to anything is up to us. How we respond, how we convey that to our teams is up to us. And then lastly, we are all a part of something bigger than self, whether it be a faith, whether it be an organization, or whether it be your family, we're all a part of something bigger than self. And when we recognize that, then you have a little bit more confidence as you go forward in this world. You're not just doing it for yourself. You're doing it for that element, that organization that you associate with, and you've got that strength behind you. And once we realize that, again, we can change the world because we are going to come through this. This too will end. There's never been a time in our human history that we've lost. What I mean by that is we're still here. There's been tragedy, there's been war, there's been famine, there's been all kinds of evil and negativity our whole life, but we're still here. So we too will come through this. It's just up to us how we come through it, and are we setting ourselves up for a position of success emotionally, professionally? It's up to us. That's the choice we have. So, ladies and gentlemen, Janelle, that's what I wanted to talk about today. So I would love to have any questions, or I mean, as you can tell, I can talk. But if you have any questions that you would like me to answer, I certainly will. If not, I've got more stories.
Thank you so much for sharing those stories with us. It was amazing, and I think that there's some really good universal messages, as you had recapped there, that we can all take away from this, especially during this time. So, does anybody have any questions for John? You can either, yep. Okay, I have one here from Nicole. Um, how did you deal with isolation when serving overseas? I'm sure it was way more isolating than quarantine here.
So it's interesting. I've talked to some folks. I said this is a lot like Afghanistan, but I'm with my family, and I'm in Pinehurst, North Carolina. So it's comparable. It's how did you deal with it? A choice. You find ways to find a positive. So I would do push-ups, sit-ups all the time. My parents' address in Howells, 2929 Weatherly Drive. And so I said, okay, so I was trying to find something to motivate me to do something. So every day, my goal was to do 200 pull-ups, 900 push-ups, 200 air squats, 900 sit-ups. I didn't necessarily do it every day, but I found a way to set a goal and to achieve something. And at least at that point, I knew that I was bettering myself. So that's one. Find a way to look to those things, to set a goal and be better yourself. So better yourself. Then I always look to better my organization. So no matter what, there's, like I said, I receive complaints all of the time. That's what I do. So whether it was at Fort Carson out in Colorado or here at Fort Bragg, but specifically in Afghanistan, 30,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, contractors, and civilians. In Afghanistan, there's could be some unhappy people. So I had to find a way to not only handle their individual problems, but I was really serving the organization if I found a way to catch those problems before they started. So it took me doing some analysis and to do the work. And then I would reach out to our leadership to say, these are the things that I've been seeing trend-wise, and these are the things I recommend to prevent those. So first, find ways, set goals to myself to better myself, and then set goals to better the organization. Because at that point, it's the same for it was the same for everybody every day. If it wasn't for the food, because the menu was the same every day. So Monday was a salad day. Tuesday was like the leftover day, which is not good in Afghanistan. Wednesday was the like a barbecue day, and so every day had a certain day. If it wasn't for the food, you didn't know what day it was. So every day was the same. So I imagine there's part of this that you all are going through as well, or that we're all going through, because there's no defining day. There isn't a weekend necessarily. Somebody asked me if I was available this weekend. I said I wish I could say I wasn't, but I'm not going anywhere. So yes, I'm available for a meeting. So every day could be the same. So I had to find ways to motivate myself, to set goals, to better myself, to better the organization, better the world around me. Because again, it comes down to being a choice. Do I choose to be upset? Do I choose to be negative? Or do I find a way to be happy? I found those things, and I had to find my own place. It was my 3 claps that got me where I needed to be. I also, um, going back to the pull-ups and challenges, I was going to the gym. I had 45 minutes to a half hour to work out, and there was a guy from Czechoslovakia. He said, "Are you going to the meeting?" We both were going to the meeting. I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, what are you going to do in the gym?" I said, "I'm going to do 200 pull-ups." And he said, "200 pull-ups for the meeting that we have in 45 minutes?" I said, "Yes." He said, "That's impossible." And that's just not something I'm used to. Impossible. And I looked at him and I said, "Well, we've put people on the moon before. Anything short of that is possible." And and then he looked at me kind of like and kind of smiled. And then I started to walk away, and I came back and I said, "We've put people on the moon before." So I found ways to feel, again, find ways to challenge yourself, make people feel good around you, and then find the light in the darkness, because there's darkness all the way around. And then at that point, he came back and he said, when it was all said and done, "Did you do it?" Because there was uh, 10 minutes before I got ready to go. And I said, "Well, of course I did." And he said, "But you're so old." Holy cats. I didn't want to hear that one either. Um, so I met him at the meeting, and he said, "Well, that was really impressive." I said, "After you told me that, I was thinking about how old it was and how old I was. I thought 200 was a lot, but because you told me how old I was, I went back and did an additional 50 for you." So we could let the world around us, rain down on us. We could let the darkness in. Find ways to motivate yourself. Find ways to improve the organization around us. And even though when folks are bringing you down, because they're going to, find a way to come out bigger, stronger, better when we come through this, because we are going to come through this. And then lastly, I found um, uh, I was focused on having thoughtful, purposeful conversations with my family. That was the other part to it. So I hope that was a lot of different things I did, Nicole, but that's what I did.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think that was very helpful. We have another question from Diane, and she asked, "What strategies did you use to motivate your troops during those darkest moments?"
Well, it's very similar. So a couple of things. You have to know your team. You have to know their strengths. You have to know what motivates them, what their concerns are. And once you do that, but first as a leader, the the vision, the guidance, that's all on me as a leader. Ultimately, when it's all said and done, for whatever organization that we're leading, if I'm the leader of that organization, the final, as the Truman said, the buck stops here. That final piece is me. I rely on my team and my staff and whatnot to help me develop my courses of action, and I value their input. But then ultimately, it is up to me. It's my guidance and intent. But next to that is then I empower them down. So still working with them, empower them to achieve those things that I've set forth and said, these are the things that we want to do. And once you start to empower them, and once you get their input and their buy-in, it's much like Diane, like I had said before, that are they committed to it? I mean, if you get commitment from somebody, it's a whole different thought process as compared to I'm doing this because I was ordered to come to Afghanistan. Once you get commitment from the people, they're going to understand because you've given your intent and your guidance and you've empowered them. They're going to do things above and beyond what you even envisioned. They're going to start seeing opportunities that you never did. So get their get their input, empower them, and then let them release their full ability. It's amazing what you can do and what your team can achieve once you start recognizing that, so first off, as the captain of the ship, I'm going to give us direction, but I can't steer it as well, but we're all going to row together. And when we all start rowing together, and Janelle, I think I use this as an example potentially, when I've come into organizations and you start to see everybody is working really hard, but it's not until you have a leader that gets them all moving in the same direction and you give them a goal and guidance, that I use the example of it's like everybody's in this massive beach ball and everybody's pushing out in their own direction. They're all pushing really hard. And what you end up having is this beach ball that kind of wobbles around and no apparent direction and whatnot. But once people start moving in that same direction, it gets momentum going in the place that you want to, and all their efforts is going forth in that same direction, you can achieve just things that you didn't even see coming. And then your team from that point will also start to point out things that are coming on the horizon that you didn't even see. So they're helping you identify those things that are on the horizon as well.
Thank you. We have another question from Brandon. What do you feel are the keys to developing our next generation of leaders? Great question. Are leaders born, cultivated, or both?
Ooh, Brandon, great question. So let me little backstory. How this all even started. So I run a leadership academy here for this small school in Pinehurst. And what I ended up, when my son and daughter were going to school there, my son was on the baseball team, and they were just getting shelled. They were horrible. And apparently I had a look of dismay on my face, and one of the parents said, "Don't worry, they're all going to get scholarships." And maybe I was a little bit too Michigan in my bluntness, but I said, "I don't know what game you're watching, but they're not going to get a scholarship in any sport." And they said, "No, academics." And that's where I looked and I said, "Boy, oh boy, maybe I've got this wrong. Maybe that my perspective was that athletics was important. It's really about academics, and this is a college prep school, so they've got it all right." Well, I watched over the next couple of years these teams continue to be horrible, and I thought this isn't right. And as I started off, the things that I've learned and that have brought me part of the success, ultimately it's the organization around me, but some of the successes I have are a direct result of what I learned in my backyard. So I'm the youngest of six. I have three older brothers that, if in fact I wanted to play with my two immediate older brothers, and I was there were three Johns in our neighborhood. It was and so I was known as Little John, and so it was a great place to grow up. Sports and interaction all of the time. But if I wanted to play anything, nobody was going to give me anything. I needed to earn it. There was no like, "Oh, come on, you can be on our team, and you're not very good, but you can certainly try, and here's a trophy." There wasn't any of that. And so I went to our headmaster of the school and to the athletic director, and I said, "I'd like to develop a leadership academy in the summer for our student athletes, because never in human history has there ever been in the DNA of anybody that's been successful is accepting defeat. Nowhere." So learning to accept defeat that's not helpful in the classroom. It's not helpful in the boardroom. in zero sort of way. We have to learn how to address some of those losses and come out on the back end being better. So I developed, Brandon, this leadership academy based on some of the things I've learned in the military. Is a 5-day camp. And ultimately, our mission statement, because I'm a military guy, I have to have a mission statement, and it's building confident, resilient individuals into integral team members, a part of something bigger than self. So day one was confidence and resilience. Day two is communication and builds trust. Day three is getting results. Day four is prepare self and develops others. And then the last one is this culmination event where we recognize in this where they publicly like recognize, hey, I am a part of something bigger than self. And I tell you all that because resilience is a word that I never grew up with. I didn't know what that was. It's something that, if asked in high school, I couldn't even spell resilience, let alone knowing what it was. But lastly, how does one become resilient? Well, teach that to somebody in our organization or in our office, let alone a high school student. It takes a lot of life lessons so that we can learn how to be resilient. But so we would develop this through this, where we had some folks that would come in. In fact, day one we had this the only female participant in the All Army Combatives tournament. So combatives is, day one is jujitsu for these combatives participants. Day two is closed hand strikes to the torso and open hand strikes to the head. And day three is closed hand strikes to the head, torso, jujitsu, all of it. She was Captain Sarah Toyota was the only female participant in this all male event. And on day one, first event, she lost. And I said, Sarah, what happened? And she said, sir, I just knew I was going to kill this guy. And when I did, I got out of my training. I got out of my plan. I got ahead of myself, got over my skis. And I started pressing, and he recognized that, and he beat me. So it was a 2-match knockout, and so she had to come through the loser's bracket if she wanted to continue. Well, she won everything else on day one. She won everything on day two, and ended up in the semifinals on day three. So we went to watch, and Sarah had her OCP, or her uniform pants on the bottom, had a t-shirt on, had her hair pulled back in a nice tight bun like we were supposed to do in the military. And she steps out against this guy, and first thing, he punches her right in the nose, knocks her bun out, her hair's all over the place. I don't think she was concerned about that as much as she had received a broken nose. So I asked my students after she was telling that story, what do you do when you receive a figurative or literal punch in the nose? How do you respond to that? Do you cower? Do you back off? Do you quit? So she continued on this story, and she said, I just remembered my training. I remembered all the work that I had done. I had stuck with the plan. I trusted in my coaches. I trusted in my work and my effort. Sure enough, there was 3 5-minute rounds. After the first 2 rounds of just continuing to get pummeled, with a minute and a half left, Sarah was just hanging on this competitor that she was fighting against. And I thought, gosh, this is just embarrassing. This is tough. I want to throw in the towel. And Brandon, she was pulling up, and next thing she did, she flipped him over, arm barred him, and he tapped out, and she won. So she was beat up, she was pummeled, but she was never defeated. She never quit. Now, I'm not endorsing, and another caveat to this is she ended up receiving a concussion, and she needed to receive a medical waiver to take her troops to Afghanistan. And so I'm not endorsing, especially in this world of concussion protocols and whatnot. I'm not endorsing like, hey, get punched in the face and continue, playing basketball or whatever that is. But what I'm saying is, from the figurative standpoint, here it is, somebody that never quit. And it didn't matter, because we need male examples, female examples. We need examples of leadership and courage and resilience and confidence in all walks of our life. So teaching that resilience. And how do you get to become resilient? You become resilient by stumbling through something, by failing, and then learning it's okay, because if we're a part of something bigger than self, and you have people that believe in you and trust in you, and they want you to continue to fight and continue to work, then you're going to give that little bit of extra effort. And when it's all said and done, as long as you are continuing to work, it's okay. You're willing to put forth a little bit more effort when it's all said and done, because you're going to get it the next time, and you're going to continue working. You're going to go out and make. I asked somebody that's a salesperson. To me, I don't know what could be would be more challenging, getting punched in the face, or literally, or getting a rejection every time you go out and try to make a sale on a daily basis. And you've got to have the resilience, the motivation to get up and continue to fight and try to sell every day. It's because you believe you're a part of something bigger than self. You're trying to work, because if you don't accept it, if you don't become resilient, you certainly will at some point say, I'm not feeling like another rejection today. But if you recognize it's going to happen, you will go out and make that sale. So day two, and so we would break these guys up, Brandon. We'd have, Sarah spoke, and then we break them into small groups. And then they talk about times that they haven't been confident, and then they hadn't been resilient, and ways that they could be. And so that all these smaller groups could learn by collaborative effort, and that they weren't going to learn these things if it was unidirectional, as if I was just being the sage on stage, so to speak. But they would learn from each other and talk about times that they hadn't been, in ways that they could, and they could work with one another. And so then they would come back and they would brief out. They would tell what their small groups have done, and so that we all learn from the small groups. We all boats rise with the tide, as I say. So that was the going. That's how we did day one of confidence and resilience. Day two of that, communication and builds trust. We did the same type of model, and we had a team building event. Day three was gets results. Gets results doesn't mean just we always win, but how do we get results? How do we set goals? How do we prioritize our resources? How do we do those things that help us achieve our goals? And I had the strength and conditioning coach for North Carolina State football team come in and talk. And he talked about football players that always want to celebrate, they make a great catch and they run all the way down the field. And for some reason, just before they cross into the end zone, they like to throw the ball up and they run through, and they've dropped the ball and it goes to the other team. And he said, I don't know why players do that. Why don't you run through the end zone? Why don't you continue running all the way through? He said, go the extra mile. There's never a traffic jam on the extra mile. And that's the case. Everybody wants to start celebrating short, but go the extra mile. So when he came and spoke to our folks, we went the same route. They'd go into the small groups and talk about ways that they could prioritize and prioritize those resources and whatnot. Day four was the prepare self and develops others. It's really difficult, especially as a high school student athlete, where we look into things like telling our peers how that they can better themselves and how they can shape behavior. But once you recognize that team believes in you, and we are bettering each other and the overall organization by telling them that, and you start to have confidence in yourself and your team, and that you are part of something bigger than self, it's so much easier to do. So it was an iterative process, Brandon, long-winded response to all this, iterative process to get people to understand that all these things are critical, and that at the very end, when you recognize that you're a part of something bigger than yourself, then all these other pieces fall right into place. And that's how we did this for this Leadership Academy. But I told them, and getting to your point directly, these things that we're teaching in here are applicable on the basketball court, the soccer pitch, the baseball field. They're equally as important and effective in the hallways, classroom, boardroom, and I can say specifically on the battlefield. These things that we learn are universal, and they will hold through in any organization. So we build those things, those skill sets in people, so that they can improve the organization, so that they can learn these things. And it's something that we must teach and develop in each of us, so that they can go on and start improving the organization around us.
All right. What were you going to add something there?
I thought there was one more, there was another
There
question.
was one more comment from Kate. She had just said that she had to step out for another meeting and that she wanted to thank you for your service and dedication to our country and for the injection of inspiration and optimism this morning. So, and I would agree. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, stories of others that you've come to know in your experiences. And thank you so much for your authenticity as well and your candor. It's just been incredible to get to know you through this webinar and to have a better understanding of who you are. We love that you're, this is Livingston County, born and raised, and a true living example of what that looks like. And we really, I personally appreciate it a lot. I know that when hearing Sarah's story, I can relate, not maybe in the literal sense, but in the sense that going through this, it's definitely been tough for me, just even every day, just trying again and getting up every day because there's so many defeats throughout that day that you just have to keep getting up and keep going and keep trying and remembering that, you're part of something bigger than self. So thank you so much for that reminder and sharing those stories with us today. And I hope all of you had an opportunity to take something away. Thank you for your questions and engaging because I think that those are the greatest ways that we learn are from each other and from our experiences and in sharing those with each other. So thank you so much. Does anybody have anything else that they wanted to add before we wrap up at the end of our thing today? All right. Well, thank you again. Thank you, Diane, for setting this up. I think you're still here, but we haven't heard from you. And we really appreciate it. And we hope that in the fall, we'll be able to gather in person. Lieutenant Colonel Samples will be here for the Hero Roundtable, I believe is in October. So we're hoping to do something and partner with the Howell Chamber on that as well. And hopefully we can share your stories with more of our members so they can continue to benefit from some of these experiences and apply these rules to their everyday life as well. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Take care. Have a great day.
You do the same.
Thank you.